Today is Saturday, June 27th, 2015, and we will look today at the third and final case in our trilogy of koans and the evolution of Master Deshan from aggressive Dharma personality to refined and subtle sage. If you remember a few weeks back in case 28 of the Wu Men Quan, Deshan set off with a great pack of commentaries and notes on his cherished Diamond Sutra on his back. Lugging this treasure of carefully thought out wisdom, he set off for the south of China to put an end to the Zen heretics who were saying that realization of the mind was possible without dependence on any particular sutra, without dependence on book learning, that there was a great truth that could be realized by direct pointing to mind itself without dependence on words and letters. But let's be clear, without dependence does not mean not using words and letters. We just don't need to cling to them or put our belief in a self made of such things. So, scholar monk Deshan's attack on Zen was brought to a halt by an old lady selling tea and sweet cakes. She seems to have known quite intimately what the Diamond Sutra was actually talking about, and not from book learning. While not a scholar, she knew the sutra all right, and was also masterfully living its meaning. Her question to Deshan about the Diamond Sutra, when he told her that's what he was lugging around in that pack on his back, which he asked him to please let her know what he was carrying, she said to him, "Past mind is not graspable." That's what the Diamond Sutra says. Present mind is not graspable either. That's also in the Diamond Sutra. And finally, future mind is not graspable. That's all in the Diamond Sutra, isn't it, Venerable Sir? In that case, which mind will you now refresh with tea and cakes? And that question, suddenly, from an old lady, made all of Deshan's notes and commentaries useless. What was he going to do? Look up the answer in a book? He asked instead if there was a Zen master nearby, and she sent him to Master Lungtan, who very kindly completed the initial damage, blowing out the last of Deshan's spark. In that instant of complete darkness, his mind exhausted, gone, entirely gone. He found real light. Hot-headed as ever, he then burned all his cherished notes, saying that even the greatest learning, the most careful study, amounts to no more than a few drops of water thrown into a great ravine, the ravine of the great emptiness of our own mind. Then, greatly enlightened, he set off on the traditional path of pilgrimage in order to examine the living Dharma of other realized teachers of his time. So he comes to Kuei Shan's temple in case number 4 of Hekiganroku, or Blue Cliff Record, Pian Lu in Chinese rather. Hekiganroku is Japanese. This time he's not carrying his pack of notes, but carrying his monk's bundle. And he has another dramatic interchange, this time with Kuei Shan. And then, once more, heads off for a high and lonely peak where, as Kuei Shan predicts, he will scold Buddhas and laugh at patriarchs. High praise, perhaps, though there may also be some sand in that rice. So watch out. If you carelessly bite into a bowl of it, even if it's well cooked, white, fluffy, and soft, you might still crack a tooth. Finally, we'll now catch up with Deshan quite a bit later in his life's pilgrimage. He's the head of a temple himself now, an old and refined teacher, well settled in his realization and in his role as teacher. Let's see how he holds up. He's not carrying a heavy backpack of notes. He's not carrying a monk's ritual bundle. He's just carrying his lunch bowls, headed toward the dining room for the midday meal. Now, we'll go back to the Wumen Quan, gateless barrier, and look at case number 13. Deshan carries his bowls. And the case goes like this. One day, Deshan came to the dining room, carrying his bowls. Shui Feng asked him, "Where are you going with your bowls? The bell has not rung, and the drum has not been struck." Deshan turned around and went back to his room. Shui Feng told this to Yen To, who remarked, "Great as he is, Deshan has not grasped the last word." Hearing about this, Deshan sent for Yen To and asked, "Don't you approve of me?" Yen To whispered his reply to him. Deshan said nothing further. The next day, when Deshan took the high seat before the assembly, his presentation was very different from usual. Yen To came to the front of the hall, clapping his hands and laughing loudly, saying, "How wonderful! Our old boss has got hold of the last word. From now on, no one under heaven can outdo him." Then Wu Men's commentary. As for the last word, neither Yen To nor Deshan has ever dreamed of it. When you examine them closely, you find they are just like puppets on a stage. And then Wu Men's verse. When you realize the first word, you understand the last word. The first word or the last word, it is not a word. Now, a couple of notes. Deshan Swan Shen, Japanese would be Toksan. His years were 782 to 865. Shui Feng Yi Cun, his years were 822 to 908. His Japanese name is Seppo. And he was the Tenzo, that is, head cook of the monastery at the time of this incident. Yen Tu Chuan Hu, 828 to 887, Japanese Gonto. These were all very important Zen figures. So this is a very rich and very subtle, almost perfect koan. Plus, it shows the genius of an advanced practitioner and the teacher working together for the sake of the entire community. In other words, it shows Sangha in action. Sangha and practice realization together. Shui Feng, Seppo in Japanese, though older than Yen To, which would be Gonto in Japanese, is not yet realized at the time of this koan story. He is known in Zen circles as the man of effort. That's the archetype that he presents. That is, he is a person of dedicated practice, determined. He never gave up, but kept going on and on in his practice. At the time of this koan story, he's about 40 years old, not yet fully realized, and he's had some openings perhaps, but it's still hazy to him, not yet clear. He will persist, and by persisting will go on to become one of the very important Zen teachers of the Tang era, with many Dharma descendants. Yen To, Gonto, is actually, though his senior in practice, is younger than him. And he is known as the archetype of the man of talent, really of genius and resourcefulness. Here, using an opportunity in his life to give the Dharma wheel a good turn. Yen To was brilliant, a shooting star of Dharma. Fast off the mark, he got it, and got it at once, was way ahead of others, and really brilliant. He actually helped bring Shui Feng Feng rather, come to full realization later on, after they'd left the monastery to go on pilgrimage together, as we'll see. The irony is that, brilliant as he was killed while still young, run through with a sword by bandits, brigands, and so he never had any formal Dharma heirs at all. Interestingly, he himself predicted that he would die giving a great shout, and that's indeed what he did. When he was run through, he gave a great shout. It was so loud a shout that it would reverberate and become a personal koan for young Hakuin almost 1,000 years later in Japan. How, he obsessively wondered, could such a deeply enlightened man as Yen To be killed like that? And how? And why? Cry out. If he was really enlightened, why couldn't he prevent it? That shout was in part Yen To's Dharma legacy, and it drove Hakuin into such deep practice and deep awakening that he spontaneously cried out when he got to the bottom of it that Yen To was alive and well. In working on the koan, first we have to get Deshan. What is he up to? Carrying those bowls? When he's confronted by the Tenzo, Shui Feng, Seppo, as he's known in Japanese, we mentioned was around 40 at the time and head of the kitchen, he turned and walked away and says nothing. Why does he turn and walk away? And why does he say nothing? He's told, well, the bell hasn't been struck, the drum hasn't been beaten, we haven't announced the meal yet. He just turns, walks away, says nothing. He used to be quite a talker, if you remember some of those earlier koans in which he's featured. Is he just old and tired now? He turned and walked away in both those other koans too. He burned his notes, if you remember, and free of his pack of knowledge and wisdom, left Lungtan's monastery, just turned his back on the Dharma hall and left. Well, no, that was later, and turned his back on the and he carries his bundle. But he did leave. He just leaves. He burns his notes after Lungtan blows out his candle. He has his great experience. He burns all his notes, and he leaves. Puts on his sandals and leaves. Then he picked up his bundle in the next koan, turned his back on the Buddha hall, put on his sandals, and left Kuei Shan's monastery too, after having a very interesting exchange with the teacher, Kuei Shan. He comes into the hall where Kuei Shan is doing zazen, and he says, nothing, nothing. And he heads out, and he goes, I've got to, that wasn't, I should really do it properly. So he takes his monk's bundle, goes back in, makes his about to make his proper obeisance, takes out his kneeling cloth that a monk would spread on the ground, is about to do his prostration. Kuei Shan lifts up his whisk, and suddenly Deshan, still a young firebrand, shouts, "Cuts!" Turns around and leaves. So here he's an old man. He turns and leaves again. This time he's holding his lunch bowls and just quietly heads back to his room. What's going on? Is he senile? Is he dumbfounded and embarrassed by his era? Getting too old to remember things? His eyesight too bad to read the time right? Uh-oh, that's not good. Or is he teaching? If so, what is he teaching? How will you present your understanding of Deshan in the Doksan room? As students, that would be your question. How will you embody it further in your life? Hey, fool, didn't you see we're not open yet? Hey, can't you read the sign? Hey, the line forms on the right, and so on. Who hasn't encountered such things? And Shui Feng, Seppo, what's up with him? He's in charge of the kitchen. The Tenzo is a demanding job, one that requires insight and scrupulous attention in all the informal daily life situations. The Tenzo has to be really with it. He or she's got the health and well being of the whole monastery, which could be hundreds or even thousands of monks in his or her hands. He or she also has to understand budgets and the realities of the marketplace. They can't just be sitting, clinging to emptiness. Tenzo has to be dealing with stuff all the time. Food must be procured, prepared, and on the table at the exact right times each day: breakfast, lunch, dinner. Only someone grounded, capable, and with good vibes can handle the kitchen and the food. Bad vibes, and the monks are having stomach troubles instead of doing zazen. But good vibes or not, so it's a very important position. Only someone highly respected and seen as very capable is going to be given the job of Tenzo. But good vibes or not, what's going on with Shui Feng? Has he somehow goofed even more than the teacher, Deshan? Was the meal not ready on time? Is that why Deshan was there? It should have been ready? Or is there another kind of goof that he's uh, that he's making? Has he goofed in another way? And again, how will you show it? And then there's Yento, Gonto, the man of real talent, who steps in and turns the whole thing into a communal koan. How about that? The old boss, Zen's colloquial words for a teacher, the old boss, great as he is, doesn't have the last word. Why would he say such a thing? How could it benefit anyone's practice? Isn't that putting down the teacher, creating division, separation, gossip, the very opposite of real practice, destroying Sangha harmony, weakening Shui Feng's faith in their teacher? For a man of insight, that seems pretty shallow. And how would he know anything about a last word? And later, that whispering to the teacher, to Deshan, and Deshan's silence again. The firebrand who walked into Kueshan's monastery saying, nothing, nothing, cuts. He says absolutely nothing. He's absolutely silent again. What the heck is going on with that? And why is it being done? How will you show what you grasp of it, even as you yourself look into the meaning of that whispering and of that last word? Plus, how is Deshan's Teisho different the next day? It says his Teisho was quite different the next day. How might we show our understanding of that? It's never spoken of in the koan. It's never revealed how his Teisho was different, and it's not traditionally held as a Dharma point to present. Yet it's clearly important, so we should clarify it too. What happened? And how would you present it? Really, this is quite a subtle and quite a challenging koan, wouldn't you say? Yento and Deshan, who now, after many years of dedicated practice realization, is a wise, subtle, and very refined old teacher, are making brilliant use of the realities of monastery life to reveal not just their personalities, but the essence of the Dharma. And though they turned the Dharma wheel, here's a kicker, Shui Feng did not come to realization at that time. Here's how he did come to realization. This is from Aiken Roshi's Teisho on this case in the gateless barrier of Wu Men Quan, case 13, Deshan, bowls in hand. So, in one sense, Shui Feng was a disciple of Yento, though he was older than Yento by some 6 years. Nominally, of course, both were students of Deshan. Shui Feng came to his realization with Yento, when they were on pilgrimage together. Here's the story. The two monks stayed overnight in the village of Ao Shan, where they were snowbound for several days. Yento spent much of his time sleeping, but Shui Feng sat up all day and most of each night doing zazen. During one of his waking moments, Yento said, "What are you doing, sitting there all day long like a mad deity by the road?" Shui Feng pointed to his chest and said, "I'm not yet at peace here." Yento said, "What kind of experiences have you had in the past? Tell me, and I will clarify them for you." So Shui Feng told him about a realization of emptiness he had with the teacher Yen Kuang, and about an awakening he had upon reading the verse Tongshan Liangche had written on his own enlightenment. And that verse was, "He is the same as me, yet I am not he." On still another occasion, Shui Feng said, "I asked our teacher, Deshan, whether or not I could share the same experience as our ancestors, and he gave me a blow with his stick. It was," he said, "as though I were a bucket whose bottom suddenly dropped out." Gosh, these all sound like very good practice realization moments. But with this, Yento gave a shout and scolded him, saying, "Don't you know that what enters from the gate cannot be the treasure of the house? If you want to propagate the great teaching, Maha, great, Mahayana, great way, it must flow point by point from within your own breast to cover heaven and earth. Only then will it be the action of someone with spiritual power." At that instant, Shui Feng suddenly had realization and cried loudly, "Today, for the first time, our Shan has become enlightened." Remember, they were staying at the village of Ao Shan. So with this profound experience, Shui Feng went on to become one of the most capable Zen teachers of all time, and his many successors in turn have inspired the world. Deshan's teachings and Yento's earnest prompting led Shui Feng, the man of effort, to full realization of his inherent talent. But in today's drama, he is in middle life and not yet at ease with himself. And so, if you remember what happens, Deshan comes down to the dining hall carrying his bowls. And it was Shui Feng who says, "Where are you going with your bowls in hand, old teacher? The bell has not rung, and the drum has not yet sounded." Deshan turned and went back to his room. One might expect him to say, as head of the temple, "The meal is late. You know our schedule is tight. When we have to wait for the meal, that means the time for the monks to rest is shortened, and they need their rest. So it's important that we have our meals on time." But he said no such thing. He just turned and went back to his room. This, says Aiken Roshi, is the first noteworthy point of the case. Then Deshan heard about Yento's, Shui Feng then told this to Yento, who was his senior in the Dharma, and it was Yento who said, Uh, Old Deshan, great as he is, does not yet know the last word. So he's taking this situation. The old teacher has come downstairs with his bowl for the meal. Uh, the meal isn't ready. Uh, he's told off in a way. He's turned around and left. Uh, Shui Feng, the Tenzo, head of the kitchen, is probably feeling pretty good about himself. He's told off the old teacher. He stood his ground. He kind of noticed that the old teacher might be slipping, kind of losing his sharpness, and tells this to his Dharma friend, Yen To. Yen To is quite brilliant. He sees an opportunity here. And he goes, "Yeah, bro, you're right. Old Deshan, great as he is, does not yet know the last word." He's creating a situation. Shui Feng and probably all the monks in the monastery are going to start wondering now, what is the last word? If old Deshan doesn't have the last word, how could I have the last word? How can I realize the last word? What is the last word? Oh, Yento, quite brilliant, that man of genius. Then Deshan himself heard about Yento's remark and sent for him. Yento secretly whispered his meaning, and Deshan said nothing. Aiken Roshi says you should appreciate Deshan's calm spirit and prepare yourself to show that spirit everywhere. That's difficult to do. So many disappointments, so many injustices, so much unfairness we encounter, each of us, in our lives. Should we just say nothing? Really? What is that spirit that Deshan is showing? Is it just about shutting up and not complaining, not being a whiner? If so, I don't think that this case would have lasted 1,000 years. Don't whine. My mother could have told me that. Don't complain. My father could have told me that. What's Deshan pointing us to? And what about Yento's whisper? Can you fathom it? What is going on there anyway? Next day, when Deshan took the high seat before his assembly in China, Zen teachers usually sat on a high seat, like a bamboo seat. Everyone else was seated low. They were seated up on some, maybe a cushion. Sometimes they wouldn't even be seated in lotus or half lotus or quarter lotus, whatever. Their legs would just be hanging down like you're sitting in a chair. When Rose and I and many of Sunyana Roshi's students were on pilgrimage in China in 2006, we went to Joshu's monastery. And the teacher, the abbot there, was quite something, quite a practitioner, a young man, quite brilliant, spoke fluent English, a very dedicated practitioner, but really someone extremely impressive in a beautiful way. When he gave Teisho, and we were there 3 days, he gave Teisho for us every day, it was very different than anything you've seen in Japan or in American Zen. We all sat on the platform, that raised ton. And when Teisho was given, we all turned around. Our legs hung down, like you're sitting on a chair, but you're sitting on the edge of the platform on your cushion. He himself was sitting on the platform up in the front with his legs down. And the attendants would come around and fill everyone's cups with tea. During the Teisho, you'd sit there and drink tea. They'd refill it several times. And it was very different, very Chinese atmosphere, like you hear in these old koans. Deshan took the high seat before his assembly, and his presentation was very different from usual. Yen To came to the front right up in front where the teacher was speaking, uh, and clapped his hands, laughed aloud, said, "How wonderful! Our old boss has got hold of the last word. From now on, no one under heaven can outdo him. There's no one on earth could outdo him because he's got the last word." Uh, that's quite a challenge, isn't it? Suppose you were in the assembly at that time, says Eikenoshi. How would you answer Yento's implicit challenge about the last word? What's he getting at? What's he forcing all the monks to participate in? Not just Shui Feng, head of the kitchen, but now all the monks there are faced with that problem, that dilemma. What is the last word? How can I get it so that no one under heaven could outdo me? I'd like that. What do I do? This is part of the brilliance of Yantou. Wu Men comments, as to the last word, neither Yento nor Deshan had yet dreamed of it. And Ikenoshi says that's true. No one can imagine such a thing. When we were children, getting in the last word was very important in an argument. Sometimes adults indulge in this kind of childish compulsion, even by mail, even by depositions. Surely there's always a last word after the last word. So what is Yento talking about here? If you've ever been in an argument with a friend, with a partner, with a spouse, with a teenage child of yours, you know how important getting the last word can be. That's not the last word that's being spoken about here. What is the last word? That's not a childish compulsion. So, he and Deshan, that is Yento and Deshan, thought they were doing something important. Wu Men says, Wu Men comments, but when you examine them closely, you find they're just like Punch and Judy in a booth. A couple of puppets. Really comes not to very much at all. Heikenroshi goes on to say, just like Bert and Ernie on TV. In other words, Yento and Deshan were saying, let's put on a show and see if we can get something going here with brother Shui Feng. As Wu Men says in another connection, even in failure, it was a wonderful performance. And then in his verse, Wu Men continues the theme, but with a variation. When you realize the first word, you understand the last. With the introduction of first, the dimension changes. The question becomes, what is the first word? You must realize it all by itself. And then, he says, you will know whether pigs have wings. I think that's a kind of dated phrase. Something of Eikenroshi's generation creeps in there. I don't know anyone of our generation, though we're getting to be old fogies ourselves, who uses, you'll know whether pigs have wings. Certainly I never grew up with that, but maybe you did. The first and the last, says Wu Men, as to this, it is not one word. This is a hard couplet to translate. Eikenroshi did his own translation, especially the final line. I can't be sure that I have it right. Never mind. The basic question concerns the this. What is this? First and last, as to this. It's not one word. What is this? He asks. So, to go on. Shui Feng did not come to realization. Neither did the monks. How about that? All this wonderful work by Yento and Deshan. Deshan turning away. Deshan being silent. This was indeed profound teaching. It didn't do anything. Yet despite that failure, it is brilliant teaching. And it turns the Dharma wheel, showing Zen at its finest, teacher and student working together, the Sangha working together. as a Sangha, for the sake of the living Dharma, not the Dharma in a book, not the Dharma on a page, but in life, in the little things that actually happen. Let's take a look. I'm going to take a look now at another book on the Wumen Quan. This is by a brother teacher of mine, Ken Margaridge, who is Dharma heir of Dane and Henry Roshi, as I am soon to legally, officially be. He is one of the three teachers at the Zen Center of Denver. His book on the Mumonkan is Dogs, Trees, Beards, and Other Wonders. And he says, let's see, Shui Feng was a very sincere, and he's the Tenzo, remember, was a very sincere and hardworking student, but at this point he is nowhere near reaching his later potential. He wandered a great deal from one teacher to another and struggled long and mightily with the practice, as many of us do. But one could not say that he had gotten it yet. This is not a bad thing. Practice is what is important. The realization, the Kensho experience, is the icing on the cake. Wherever he is, he has the most important attribute one can have to engage this practice: bone-headed persistence. He is also a man of great passion. He is never going to give up. That's the essence of the man of effort. We're all people of effort, like Shui Feng. We're also all people of genius, like Zendo. By the way, just as an aside, the current issue of Buddha Dharma has a little panel discussion in it on koan practice with a couple of different teachers and an introduction by Ross Bolliger, who is a teacher in Diamond Sangha tradition. But one of the three teachers on the panel is Bodhin Kolhid Roshi, right here of the Rochester Zen Center. He makes an interesting point. He says some of his most important doksan were the times that Kapla Roshi wrung him out. Not that he was accepted on his view of the koan, he was wrung out. And he said that in many ways was the most important part of his practice. Gaining a certain kind of persistence, gaining an equanimity of not being totally thrown by rejection, learning to go deeper, seeing that there was more yet, that all his hard work hadn't yet opened to him. This is a very important point. Sometimes the failure is wonderful indeed, as Wu Men will say in his commentary on another koan later on in the Wu Men Koan. Sometimes the failure is wonderful indeed. There's a much deeper point to that, but we won't take a look at that at the moment. So Shui Feng sees De Shan come down with his bowls, or does he? When we see our teacher, our boss, our children, a friend, whom do we really see? Do we see the reality? Or do we rather see our own desires, jealousies, longings, ambitions, preconceptions, judgments, projections? What does it take to really see? De Shan, the teacher, sees clearly. Shui Feng does not yet. And Shui Feng calls out, where are you going with your bowls? The bell is not rung, the drum's not been struck. What does he think he's doing? How would you greet your teacher if he came early to dinner? And De Shan returns to his room without a word. What is he doing? And he talks a little about Shui Feng. Let's see if there's anything else important in Ken's commentary I'd like to share with you. He says Yento, Gonto in Japanese, sees immediately that Shui Feng, the Tenzo, head of the kitchen, has not seen the subtle and profound teaching of Deshan, the teaching that is Deshan. But now he's in a quandary. He could remain silent, as Deshan did. Deshan's teaching was very high and very pure. He said nothing. What is that silence? Why is that a very high and pure teaching? In any case, Ken says he could remain silent, but that would only perpetuate Shui Feng's error. He could say, "Hey man, you blew it. You don't have a clue." That would not be kind, and Shui Feng could very well get angry and defensive. And the other monks might view it as the establishment putting down the brave young challenger. So Yento has about 2 seconds to come up with something brilliant. He improvises a koan right on the spot, a special koan, just for Shui Feng. Great as he is, Deshan does not yet know the last word. Yento disarms the entire assembly by seeming to admit that the master might not be quite up to snuff. It's a wonderful example of skillful means. Yento isn't afraid to get down in the weeds and kick up some dust if he thinks it might help. So what is this last word? That's the question. For us, what is this last word? And then that whispering. When Deshan hears of all this, and Yento whispers to him, and again, Deshan is silent. So we have this dilemma that we work on. And it's a wonderful story showing Dharma in action, in actual reality, making use of ordinary things. However, Wu Men takes us further. He doesn't let us remain there with, great story. His commentary turns us around and puts us back into our practice right now. For the work of Deshan and Yento and Shuifeng didn't end 1,000 years ago. This case, put together by their efforts and the efforts of Master Wu Men, becomes our work now. And so they are still working to help us clarify our practice realization. This is not just an old story. We're carrying our bowls to a meal that is about to be served. Are we early? Is the meal late? We've worked hard. Shouldn't it be ready? How will we react when it doesn't turn out the way we thought? When we don't get the meal we've come for? How do you react when you don't get what you think you deserve? How do I react when I don't get what I think I deserve? Come with bowls in hand. Done everything right. Meal's not ready. We don't get it. How does that make us feel? We're still working on it. Here's Wu Men's commentary. As for the last word, neither Yento nor Deshan has ever dreamed of it. Again, I'll repeat, when you examine them closely, you find they are just like puppets on a stage, or as Aitken Roshi says, like Punch and Judy. This is part of our meal. This is what you brought your bowls for. Please chew on that. And Ken makes the point in his commentary that Punch and Judy may be bashing each other, but if you look behind the little portable stage, you'll see, my gosh, it's just one guy with a puppet on each hand. There is no Punch. There is no Judy. It's just one person. 2 hands. Please chew on that. And when you're done, here's your dessert. The verse urging us on to get it even more fully, to realize Deshan and Yento right now as ourselves, and to do it simply and directly, without theorizing, without philosophy, with nothing but the bare fact in which disagreement is not even possible. In short, the last word. The last word is so true. There can't be another word. There can't be anything to disagree with. When the last word is said, it's that clear. Woman's verse says, when you realize the first word, you understand the last word. The first word or the last word, it is not a word. So there's the full meal. All the courses. We eat it up, and our bowl is empty again. Bows then to our teachers, skilled cooks, and attentive waiters.